You've been told money is safe. You've been told collapse only happens in distant, unstable places, not in modern economies. But what if that's a lie? What if history is filled with real currency collapses, hidden behind academic terms and quiet policy moves? Because here's the truth. Every great empire, every dominant currency, every trusted system has failed. Not suddenly, slowly, then all at once. Before we start, take a second. If you want to see how money really dies, not in theory, but in documented history, make sure you subscribe. It helps bring these stories that most textbooks ignore back into focus. And while you're here, drop a comment below. Which country are you watching from? And what time is it where you are right now? It's always fascinating to see how far these money stories reach. Now, let's strip away the myths. When currencies collapse, it's not random, it's not magic, it's math. Every paper system follows the same pattern. First, debt expands faster than production. Then, governments print to fill the gap. Prices rise, trust fades. People rush for anything real. Gold, goods, dollars, land. At first, leaders deny the problem, then they blame others. Finally, they lose control. By the time citizens realize what's happening, their savings buy nothing. We'll walk through proof. Real examples, from Weimar Germany to modern Argentina, from Zimbabwe's trillion-dollar bills to Venezuela's worthless bolivar. And yes, from America, as gold abandonment in 1971 to the stealth inflation that ends hollowing every paycheck today. You'll see how collapse doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like normal life getting a little more expensive every day. Start with Weimar Germany, 1920s. After World War I, Germany owed massive reparations in gold or foreign currency, payments it couldn't afford. The government printed marks to buy those currencies, flooding its economy with paper. At first, it seemed clever. Debt paid, wages up, growth steady. But then came the spiral. Prices doubled, tripled, multiplied daily. By 1923, a loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Workers were paid twice a day. Families burned cash for heat because wood cost more. That collapse wasn't caused by war alone. It was caused by denial. Every warning was ignored. Every problem was patched with new printing. And behind it, bankers insisted the system would hold. Until it didn't. Fast forward to Zimbabwe in the 2000s. Once a food exporter, it began seizing farmland, destroying production. Tax revenue fell. The government printed money to cover costs. Within years, inflation topped 230 million%. People carried stacks of notes in wheelbarrows. Shops marked prices by the hour. The currency died, replaced by foreign cash. Now, you might think, that's Africa. That's not the same. But the laws of money don't change by geography. They change by math. When debt outpaces growth, collapse is inevitable. Whether you call it hyperinflation or quantitative easing, the result is the same. Value leaks from the bottom up. Even the mighty British Empire saw its pound crumble. Before World War I, 1 pound equaled nearly $5, backed by gold. By the 1970s, it took more than $2 just to buy a pound, a 60% loss in purchasing power even before inflation took its toll. The empire ruled half the planet, yet its currency couldn't survive its own debt. And then there's the US dollar, the symbol of global stability. In 1971, President Nixon cut its link to gold, promising nothing would change. But prices soared. The dollar's value today buys less than 4 cents compared to its 1913 purchasing power. That's not a stable store of value. That's a slow-motion collapse. It's just packaged better. Every collapse begins with confidence. As long as people trust the paper, it holds value. Once that faith cracks, it breaks fast. That's why leaders always say, this time is different, because their power depends on keeping confidence alive. But let's look at Argentina, a living case study. In the last century, it's defaulted 9 times. Inflation often exceeds 100% a year. Savings vanish. Yet every time a new peso appears, a new promise made. Today, locals price real estate in US dollars, not their own currency. They've learned that paper backed by politics always fails. Still, there's a deeper truth here. Collapse isn't just about printing, it's about incentives. Governments overspend because voters demand benefits. Banks lend because profits depend on expansion. Central banks cut rates to keep the illusion alive. Everyone wants stability. No one wants discipline. That's how systems rot from within. We've seen this pattern before. Rome's denarius, once pure silver, was gradually debased to less than 2% metal content. Citizens noticed. Prices rose. Trade shifted. Eventually, the empire lost faith in its own coins. It wasn't barbarian invasions that ended Rome's economy. It was inflation. History doesn't repeat, but money does. Every time value gets detached from reality, the clock starts ticking. Some collapses happen fast. Others crawl for decades. But the result is always the same. Trust dies and power resets. If you're thinking, this can't happen in my country, pause. Every country that collapsed once said that. France said it before the revolution. Russia said it before 1998. Turkey said it before the lira lost 80% in 2 years. Every leader believes they'll manage better. Every generation learns they won't. So here's the question. If paper money always fails, why do we keep rebuilding systems on it? Why do we accept inflation as normal? Why do we save in something designed to lose value? The answer lies in habit. People forget. Each collapse fades from memory, replaced by a new promise, a new system, a new illusion. In the next section, we'll break down the mechanics. You shall see exactly how a currency collapse unfolds step by step, from policy mistakes to panic in the streets. You'll understand the math behind the madness and why the same formula always leads to the same result. Stay with me. This part is where you realize it's not just history, it's a warning. Let's break it down, the mechanics of a real currency collapse. Because while every nation's story looks different, the pattern never changes. It always begins with debt, followed by denial, then devaluation, and finally destruction. These 4 stages are the anatomy of every failed currency in history. Stage 1, the debt spiral. It starts small. Governments spend a little more than they earn, maybe to fund wars, welfare, or temporary programs. They promise it's under control. But soon, deficits become routine. Borrowing becomes policy. And because voters love benefits and hate taxes, leaders print money to bridge the gap. At first, this looks smart. The economy grows, people spend, markets rise. But behind the scenes, real value, productivity, trade, savings, doesn't keep up. Debt climbs faster than output. The economy's weight grows heavier than its foundation. You saw this in the French Revolution, where royal spending outpaced tax collection for decades. When reform failed, they printed assignats, paper notes backed by confiscated land. For a while, people believed. Then faith cracked. Prices surged 13,000% in 4 years. Bread riots followed. Within a decade, the currency was worthless. Sound familiar? It should. Because the same trick, print now, fix later, echoes across every central bank today. Stage 2, the denial. When inflation first appears, governments call it transitory. They blame supply shocks, greedy corporations, bad weather, anything but policy. Economists debate, news anchors reassure, and citizens adapt. They accept higher prices as normal. That's the dangerous part. Collapse doesn't start when money vanishes. It starts when trust shifts. When people stop saving and start spending faster, fearing tomorrow's money will buy less. The moment that mindset spreads, collapse accelerates. Take Venezuela, 2010s. Oil profits vanished, spending stayed high, and the government printed to fill the hole. Inflation hit 1,000%, then 10,000%. Yet officials insisted it was manageable. By the time reality broke through, it was too late. Salaries couldn't buy a meal. Citizens traded food, gold, and even US dollars on the black market. Denial is always polite at first. A press release here, a data revision there, but numbers can't lie forever. Stage 3, the devaluation. This is the breaking point. The public begins to escape the currency. They convert cash into assets, real estate, foreign money, crypto, even collectibles. Anything but paper. The government, seeing this flight, imposes controls. They freeze exchange rates, ban conversions, or limit withdrawals. In Argentina, the peso's black market rate often diverged 100% or more from the official one. That's not a glitch. That's the real market saying, we don't believe you. In Turkey, citizens watched the lira lose half its value against the dollar in months. In Russia, 1998, savings accounts evaporated overnight when the ruble collapsed. Once a nation reaches this stage, collapse becomes self-fulfilling. Each new policy, capital controls, bailouts, subsidies, only worsens the problem. Confidence shatters. And this is where most people realize the truth. The paper they trusted wasn't wealth. It was a promise. And promises can be broken. Stage 4, the destruction. Finally, the system resets. The old currency is abandoned or replaced. Sometimes the nation dollarizes. Sometimes it introduces a new version, a redenomination, where 1,000 old notes equal 1 new one. But value isn't restored, it's erased. Zimbabwe reissued its dollar multiple times. In Hungary, after World War II, prices doubled every 15 hours. In Germany, 1923, they replaced 1 trillion marks with 1 new rented mark. The paper changed. The pain didn't. People who held real assets, land, gold, commodities, survived. Those who held paper were wiped out. That's the brutal logic of collapse. It punishes belief and rewards skepticism. Now, you might ask, could this happen in modern economies? Let's look closer. In 2008, central banks worldwide printed trillions to rescue markets. Again in 2020, during lockdowns, they printed even more, far more. Between 2020 and 2022, the US created 80% of all dollars in existence. That's not a statistic, that's a signal. And when inflation surged, officials said it was temporary. It wasn't. The lesson? Collapse doesn't announce itself, It hides behind polite language, quantitative easing, stimulus, modern monetary theory. These are new names for old games. And if you're wondering, but if everyone's printing, who collapses first? That's the dangerous beauty of a global system. When all currencies fall together, there's no single hyperinflation. There's just quiet erosion, where your money loses power slowly, invisibly, year after year. The numbers tell the story. A $1 in 1970 buys what $7 does today. In the UK, $1 in 1950 buys what $30 does now. In India, the rupee's purchasing power has fallen 90% since 1990. No tanks, no riots, just steady theft through inflation. This is why understanding real collapses matters. They're not ancient tragedies, they're living patterns. And every major currency today is walking the same road, just at different speeds. Let's summarize what we've uncovered so far. Every collapse begins with debt outpacing real growth. Denial follows, experts insisting everything's fine. Then comes devaluation as people escape paper. Finally, destruction, when the system resets. In the next section, we'll go deeper into the hidden signals that reveal when a currency is nearing collapse. These are the markers central banks won't announce, but history proves every time. By the end, you'll be able to spot a failing system before the crowd even notices. Because when money starts dying, the ones who see it first don't panic, they prepare. Let's talk about the signs. Every major currency collapse gives off warnings long before it breaks. But these signals are quiet, often buried in data most people never read. If you learn to spot them early, you will see what central banks want hidden, the proof that trust is draining from the system. The first warning is negative real interest rates. That means inflation is higher than the return you get from saving. When you lose purchasing power by keeping money in the bank, you're being punished for holding cash. It tells you the system is forcing people to spend, invest, or speculate. Saving becomes a slow loss. This happened in Weimar Germany, 1970s America, and again in the 2020s. Each time, savers were pushed out of money into assets, land, gold, or stocks. Governments used inflation to quietly erode debt. But the side effect was a public that lost faith in the currency. Once that faith is gone, it never returns. The second signal is centralization of debt. In healthy economies, debt is spread across businesses and individuals. But as collapse nears, governments absorb it. They nationalize industries, bail out banks, buy bonds, and guarantee pensions. This shifts risk from private players to the state. It looks like stability, but it's concentration. And when the state breaks, everything under it falls too. Look at Japan today. Government debt is over 250% of GDP. The central bank owns most of the bond market. Yields are manipulated to appear stable, but underneath, confidence depends entirely on one institution. When that fails, the unwind will be swift. The third warning is rapid money velocity decline. Velocity measures how often money changes hands. In a strong economy, it moves quickly. People spend, invest, and borrow with confidence. But in collapsing systems, velocity drops. People hoard cash not out of trust, but fear. They delay spending, expecting worse conditions ahead. Once money stops moving, economies seize. You can see this in data from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Velocity has been falling since the late 1990s. Each crisis, .com, housing, pandemic, made it worse. This tells you people no longer trust the future enough to take risks. The system runs on printed liquidity, not real circulation. That's not growth, that's dependency. The fourth signal is capital flight. Wealth moves quietly. Before any headline collapse, elites transfer assets abroad, into foreign banks, offshore accounts, or hard commodities. They know numbers lie, but capital speaks truth. When you see rising outflows, currency controls, or strict reporting laws, you're watching a system trying to cage its own money. In Lebanon, banks froze withdrawals as the pound fell 90%. In Greece, depositors were limited to daily cash rations during the euro crisis. In China, strict foreign exchange limits show the government's fear of outflows. When a state starts trapping wealth, the collapse clock is already ticking. The fifth signal is financial repression, the use of laws to force citizens into holding bad money. It can take many forms. Governments may require pension funds to buy state bonds, set interest rates below inflation, or ban private alternatives like gold or crypto. Each measure protects the currency by trapping users. The more controls appear, the less freedom remains. History shows how this ends. Rome debased its coins until trade collapsed. Britain after World War II imposed strict exchange controls until 1979. Argentina repeatedly froze dollar accounts. Every intervention buys time, not trust. And then comes the final stage, the reset. Once confidence is gone, a new system must emerge. Sometimes it's imposed, sometimes it's negotiated. But the outcome is always the same. The old money dies, the debts are wiped, and power reorganizes around a new promise. After the Weimar collapse, Germany introduced the Rentenmark, backed not by gold, but land and industry. After Bretton Woods broke in 1971, the dollar survived by tying itself to oil. Each reset replaced one illusion with another. The next reset is already forming. You see it in central bank digital currency, CBDC programs. More than 130 countries are testing digital versions of their money. They promise efficiency and security. But the real goal is control. A CBDC allows governments to track every transaction, freeze accounts instantly, and even set expiry dates for spending. That's not freedom, it's programmable value. And when that system arrives, the question isn't, will it collapse? It's who will control the collapse, because every financial reset is less about money and more about power. The ones who print define the game. Here's the truth no one wants to say aloud. We are already in the early stages of a global currency erosion. Inflation is higher than growth. Debt is higher than output. Productivity is flat. Trust in institutions is falling. These are not separate problems. They're symptoms of the same disease. The next time someone tells you money is safe, remember this. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is 27 years. Not centuries, not millennia. Decades. And most die the same way. Quietly, under the weight of their own promises. But collapse isn't the end. It's a transfer. Value doesn't vanish. It moves. From those who trust the system to those who question it. So ask yourself, where's your trust? In paper or in proof? Because when the next reset comes, the winners won't be the ones with the most cash. They'll be the ones who saw it coming. And you, watching this right now, already know what most don't. History doesn't repeat. It rhymes through